again, and we're going to do some more cooking with Philip. One of my favorite meals is Greek food, and I love falafel. And falafel goes great with a tzatziki sauce. And tzatziki is traditionally a dill yogurt sauce. And so that, of course, is not vegan, and we're doing all plant-based cooking here. So I have a great recipe for a tzatziki sauce, which is cashew-based. And I actually like it better than any of the yogurt-based tzatziki sauces that I've ever had before. So this is my go-to sauce for Greek food, for my falafel. So I'm going to show you how to make it. It's really easy. The one thing that you'll need, I think, is really important. I think everybody should have one of these, is a Vitamix. And I know they're a little bit pricey, but I use mine several times a day. They are worth their weight in gold, and they are just very valuable. I have one of the older ones. I actually think the older one works better than the newer ones that are more expensive. The newer ones have larger containers, shorter containers. I don't think they blend as well. This older kind of standard container that they have, I think blends great. For the cashew tzatziki sauce, and for a lot of cashew-based sauces and cheeses and stuff, they recommend that you soak the cashews, oftentimes a couple hours or overnight. The nice thing about the Vitamix is it's so powerful. I really never soak my cashews. I just throw them in. So the first thing is we're going to use a cup of cashews. That's our base for the tzatziki sauce. Then, as the recipe is written, it calls for a clove of garlic. I like lots of garlic, so we're going to go with 4. Then the next thing is we're going to need to zest a lemon. So this is the zesting of the lemon, very similar to when we zested the lime. I use my micro plane, and you just want to get the bright part of the peel off, just down to where it's white. So I've zested the lemon and I've cut it in half, and now I'm just going to juice the lemon. Okay, and we're going to add the juice of a lemon. And then we have dill, a teaspoon of dill, or a little bit more. We have a 1/4 teaspoon salt and a pinch of black pepper. And then a 1/4 teaspoon or a little bit more of cumin. And then we're going to add a tablespoon of olive oil. And then the recipe calls for 2/3 cup of almond milk, but I found that just adding about a 1/2 cup of water or a little more, and then a small handful of almonds is the same as almond milk. So we have all the ingredients in the blender that we're going to blend together. Then once that's done, we're going to add some cucumber in, because the cucumber, of course, it's a dill cucumber sauce. And it requires about a cup of grated cucumber, so which is about a half, maybe a little bit more than a half of a cucumber. And so what I do is I take my cucumber and I peel it, and then I'm going to quarter it long ways like this, and I like to get rid of the seeds. So we're just going to take the seeds out, and then we're going to grate the cucumber. And it's important to use a really fine grater like this one, and then you just grate each of the 4 pieces of cucumber. And so it's going to be a nice fine grated cucumber when we're done. And the important thing too with that cucumber is to get as much of the water out of the cucumber as you can, because we already have the amount of liquid in our sauce with the water that we added with the almonds to make the almond milk, and then the lemon juice. And if you add too much more liquid, such as the liquid that comes with the cucumber, then it tends to make the sauce too runny. So what we do is we just take this cucumber that we've grated, and then we give it a good squeeze and squeeze out all of the liquid that we can. And then once we blend up the ingredients for the tzatziki sauce, then we just add the cucumber to it, and then it's done. So now we have all of our ingredients in the blender except for the grated cucumber. That goes in later. And then we just turn the blender on. Now I have blended the ingredients, except for the cucumber, for about a minute. And then I transferred the contents of the blender into my bowl here. And then I'm going to add my grated and squeezed cucumber. And then we just fold this in. Mmm, such a great smell, so fresh.
Knock, knock.
What's there?
Falafel.
Falafel. Who's falafel? Touch my knee.
I falafel my bike and cut my knee.
Next, we're going to make falafel. Falafel is a great part of a Mediterranean Greek diet. Great health properties. It's primarily based on garbanzo beans. Garbanzo beans are a legume, and beans are very important part of a plant-based diet. And eating healthy, they're also very delicious. But garbanzo beans include a lot of fiber. They have a lot of protein. Everybody's concerned about getting enough protein if you're eating plant-based, and that's a good source of protein. They have chemicals in them that have been found to be cancer-fighting chemicals. They have properties that increase your good cholesterol and lower your bad cholesterol, so they decrease the risk of heart disease. So a lot of great things about garbanzo beans to include in your diet, and this is a really delicious way to incorporate them by making falafel out of them. So we're going to use, this is the equivalent of about a 25-ounce can of falafels. I cook my own, it's cheaper, and I can use organic garbanzo beans, and I just throw them in the Instant Pot and cook them that way. And then we're going to put them into the food processor today. So we add our garbanzo beans, and then we add a red onion, a small red onion diced. And then we're going to add 4 cloves of garlic. And then we're going to add some parsley. You can use fresh parsley, which is what the recipe calls for. I didn't have any fresh parsley. So use about half of the amount or a little less of dried parsley. And then oregano, same thing. It calls for a 1/4 cup of oregano. I'm using about a little less than 2 tablespoons oregano. And then juice of half a lemon, which is about a tablespoon of lemon juice. And then a teaspoon of salt and a pinch of black pepper. And then we're just going to pulse this. We don't want to puree it. Pulse it, and you can stop and scrape down the sides about midway through. Not getting them completely pureed. Now what we do to add to this is we add some garbanzo bean flour and some baking powder. This will give it a more dough-like quality. So we add the garbanzo bean flour and then our baking powder. And then we're going to pulse that in. So this is the consistency that we want for our falafel batter. We want it a little bit chunky, but it sticks together nicely. And then what we're going to do with this is we're going to put it in the refrigerator for about 30 minutes, let it chill, and then that'll make it easier to form into our falafel balls, which you can then either fry or bake. We're going to bake ours today. It's a little healthier way, and it's very easy that way.
Let me tell you a vegan joke. I promise you it won't be cheesy.
I'm going to show you how to make bread. In particular, we're going to make flatbread, which is going to be used for our falafel. And the flatbread requires a dough that will then roll out and then we'll fry on the stove. And the flatbread dough I got the idea of making this dough from a book called Healthy Bread in 5 Minutes a Day. And the idea with that is this guy came up with this idea that you make this dough kind of a wet dough, and you put it in the refrigerator, and it actually stays in the refrigerator for a week or more. And then when you need it, you can use this dough, whatever amount you want, you can let it rise, and then you can bake it and you can have fresh bread. I've found that it doesn't rise really well for me. So I don't use it to make regular bread, but I use it to make flatbreads, and I think it works really well for that. I also use it to make my pizza crust. So what we do is I do everything whole wheat when I can, and so I like to grind my own wheat, because whole wheat flour, if you buy it, it tends to lose its nutrients very rapidly. But if it's in the wheat berry form and then you grind it and you use it right away, it has many more nutrients. So I like this hard white wheat. It's called Prairie Gold. It's from Wheat, Montana, and I like to buy it in these larger bags. You can get this over in Three Forks. So to grind my own wheat, I take 2 cups of the wheat berries, which look like that. 1 minute later, after grinding on high in the Vitamix, and we have fresh ground whole wheat flour. Very simple. So to make our dough, we need a container to put it in, and it's handy to have one of these that has a lid that you can seal. That's important. And we start out with 7 cups of our whole wheat flour. I have 3 in there already, and I just use this 1 cup, and then you just want to get it nice and level. Then we're going to add 1.5 tablespoons of rapid rise yeast, and then we have 1 tablespoon of salt, and then a 1/4 cup of Vital Wheat gluten. And then we just take a whisk and we whisk all of this stuff together, the dry ingredients. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our water to this, and that's the only other ingredient that we have to add is water. And you want warm water, because the warm water helps the yeast to rise, but you don't want to use too warm of water. So somewhere around 110, 120 degrees, because if you're over 120 degrees, you run the risk of killing your yeast, and then you don't get the activity out of it that you want. So this is our 3 3/4 cup of warm water. And then the tricky part with this is getting it all mixed in really well, because this is not a dough where you have to knead it. All you have to do is mix it up, and you tend to get some dry bits in the corners and in the edges, and you have to kind of work it a little bit. As it starts to get thicker, it's a little harder to stir, but you want to just keep stirring it until you get all of the dry flour incorporated. And once we get it all mixed in well, all we have to do after that is put the lid on. We leave it cracked just a little bit, so you don't want it completely tight. And then we set it out just on the counter for 2 hours, let it rise, and then you just stick it in the refrigerator, and then it's ready to use whenever you want. So the dough is all mixed up now. The dry is all incorporated. It's all moist, and we just stick the lid on and seal it, except for a corner that we leave not completely sealed. And we just leave that sit out in a relatively warm area on the counter for about 2 hours.
What do you get when a cat eats a lemon? A sourpuss.
Our falafel dough is now chilled in the refrigerator for 30 minutes. And we're going to take a parchment paper lined cookie sheet, and we're going to make little patties of falafel. So you can make these in varying sizes and shapes. I like mine flat, but you can make them in round balls. And now we're going to put them in the oven. And then we're going to start them out at for about 15 minutes. Falafels have baked at 400 degrees for 15 minutes. And so now we're going to, you see they're starting to get a nice golden brown on top, but we want them to be nice and brown on both sides. So we're just going to flip them over. So I ended up baking them for another 15 minutes. So they went for a total of 30 minutes. and they came out nice and golden brown. And there's Lily, hoping something will fall on the ground so that she can scavenge. To make our falafel sandwiches now, we are going to need bread to put the falafel in and all of the other parts of the sandwich. And you can use pita bread if you just want to purchase pita bread. I like to make my own flatbread, like with my whole wheat flour that I showed you how to make. And this was in our container. It sat out on the counter for 2 hours. It rises all the way to the top of the container, but then you put the lid on all the way, seal it, and put it in the refrigerator, and it has sat overnight now. And now for a week, even longer than that, I'll use this, and I just take a piece of the dough out, and I make it into a ball, and then you just roll it out. I happen to have this pastry board that I roll it with, and then just a rolling pin, and you just roll it out into a circular piece of flatbread. And once you get it nice and rolled out flat, then you want your preheated pan, spray a little olive oil on that, and you can drop your bread on there, and then it just fries on the pan for a couple of minutes, and then you flip it over, and a couple more minutes on the other side. It starts to bubble up a little bit, and that shows that it's rising and it's baking. This is nice flatbread, and flip it over, it starts to get a nice golden brown, and it's going to need a few more minutes. So this is what the flatbread looks like. Just flip it over, it has a nice golden brown on each side, and then we take that. So now we have our flatbread, and we take our tzatziki sauce. You can put a nice layer of tzatziki sauce on there, and then we can put our falafel on, and then all the toppings that you want. I like onions. Ruth was awesome and cut all these up for me. And artichoke hearts, cucumbers, Kalamata olives. And all my sandwiches end up being way too big to actually get my mouth around or even close. And then some lettuce, pepperoncinis. Then you gotta have some good tomatoes on there. And there's our falafel sandwich. Maybe a few more cucumbers for good measure. Isn't that beautiful? And very, very healthy and delicious. And now, the obligatory sampling. See if I can get my mouth around it. Here we go. Oh yeah. Best meal ever.